Welcome to Environment, ManaSota-88. Today we're most fortunate in having our Congressman from the 10th District, Andy Ireland, here with us to discuss environmental problems. Thank you so much for coming today.
I'm delighted to be here.
One of the things I think that's on everyone's mind now is offshore oil drilling, and we know that you've taken a lead position in the Florida delegation and nationwide in seeing what you could do to remove our sensitive key area and southwest Florida from the drilling from the leases that have really been let and future drilling. Could you tell us a little about this?
Well, Gloria, as you well know, and hopefully we can get more people aware of it, the federal government has a plan over 5 years to lease areas for drilling. Once they lease them, then they give permits to do actual drilling. One of the areas that they had in mind in this upcoming 5 years of leasing was off of the southwestern coast of Florida, the Florida Straits, Dry Tortugas, down in that area. In addition to that, there are a couple areas already leased down there that people are interested in beginning to drill. What we are so concerned about is that no one knows whether, number one, the drilling will disturb the environment out there, and not enough study and work has been done to determine that. And then, of course, we're concerned about the effect of drilling and the results of having a petroleum economy there on the Everglades, the Florida Straits, our beaches, and in all our tourism industry. So in a real sense, it's oil industry versus our lifestyle and tourism in Florida. And it seems to me that it's premature to just go out there and make the decisions to lease and drill when we don't know what we're getting into. Is all this heightened by an awareness, thank goodness. As sad as the Alaskan oil spill is, at least I hope it's awakened people in Florida and the nation to what can happen. And here we're talking in Alaska of 240,000 barrels of oil in that slick, when at any given moment during a day there are 3 million barrels of oil in tankers off the Florida coast. We have an oil industry out there drilling off our coast. It's going to be even more so because we'll have the problems of bringing it onshore. We face a real problem if we get into drilling for oil off of our Florida coasts. And we've joined with California and others that have sensitive areas to get a more realistic approach to our energy problems.
Do you think that you're going to have any luck, maybe with President Bush's help, as far as the Secretary of Interior is concerned?
Well, I think perhaps we will have, and we certainly have an opportunity. Last year and the last year of the Reagan administration, we were able in Congress to pass a moratorium saying, hey, we quit off of California, off of Florida. President Bush has called for a task force, which indeed will have hearings in June in Florida at various sites to look and review the program. And in the meantime, he's extended the moratorium, so to speak. Those of us in Congress that feel strongly about it are in the process of calling for a legislative moratorium as well. Hopefully we'll be able to put a thoughtful stop to what's ahead of us and move in a more measured direction in exploration off of our coast.
We appreciate the work you're doing on this. Do you, is the public going to have a chance to testify during the June hearings, do you know?
They are indeed, and I would like to report to you that more of an opportunity than at first we thought. The hearings that were first set up, scheduled for Fort Myers and Tallahassee and Miami and Key West, we're all scheduled to have 1 hour of public hearing, and then I guess some groups and the other things. Well, some of us said, well, you know, that just isn't right, and so they're going to have extended hours at these hearings for people to come and discuss, so the public can participate.
That's great, because we were all concerned that there wouldn't be an opportunity for us and other groups to be heard.
Right.
And another thing that you've done that all of us commend you for too, and I think is so significant right now, is the action you've taken with your energy efficiency bill And I think most of us know that if we can conserve our energy, that this is better than any other energy option that we presently have. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that too.
Well, it seems to me that thoughtful people interested in the environment also know that we have got our health and safety and well-being to do, and we need sources of energy, but we need to have a sensible way of going about it. Conservation is a big part of it. So are alternative sources of energy, and there are a number of us that have been calling for kind of a new approach, and we've got a number of legislative things on the agenda and initiatives to make this happen, and we're going to have to keep working away at it. But just to say that oil drilling or high sulfur coal are the only ways to go is begging the question. There are economic and health and environmental costs to all these. We've got to find the right thing.
Right, and are you interested, did I read, in linear accelerators? Is that what it was?
Well,
I wanted you to tell us a little bit about that.
well, there's not much to tell there. There are just all kinds of things. Obviously, I'm interested more in, as most people are, in that understand something about it, in the fusion process, because you don't have the waste and such that you do with fission, which is what all of our nuclear plants are based upon now. The important thing that is the problem is, in order to create fusion, we've had to use fission, or the equivalent of an atomic bomb, to start it off. And this is a matter of putting in more energy than you're getting out, which is hardly the way that we had intended. Hence all the attention to the scientists who maintain, hopefully they're right, that they've created fusion in a jar. So we've got a long way technology-wise to go. We've spent many billions of dollars on the laser technique and generated by fission to create fusion. We haven't gotten anywhere. And hopefully we'll explore other areas that will produce it. But fusion, which is the type of energy comes from the sun, it is the hydrogen bomb energy, has no residue of toxic waste, and a lot of things going for it. Humankind just hasn't found the key to that yet, and anything we can do to find it would certainly be appropriate in the circumstance.
Yeah, because I think we're all just becoming aware that the bill is coming due on nuclear fission. I think Great Britain is the first country to decommission one of their plants, and I believe that the cost was £350 million, and it's going to take 100 years. So we really don't need to depend upon nuclear fission or our present nuclear power plants to provide the kind of energy at a reasonable cost without the side effects that we want.
Isn't it funny that in our industrial world, indeed, all humankind, disposing of our waste is getting to be our number one problem, whether it's fissionable waste or plastics or what. We've got a real problem of polluting our planet with our own human waste operation, and we're going to have to get some answers to all of that.
Well, I think part of it is reducing our prolific ways without necessarily affecting our lives so much. We can reduce these things at the source, and after we discuss alternative energy sources and the funding, I wanted to get into your plastics bill too. Do you think there's any possibility of more money being set aside for alternative energy sources?
Well, difficult to say that there's appreciable more money going to be spent in that area, simply because we have such a very difficult budget problem now. We've got to get a handle on the overall budget, and we don't seem, we've got just approved by the House and the Senate a suggested budget for fiscal year 1990, and there's still a substantial deficit in it. We've got a long way to go, and America has got to start making priorities. We haven't really done it this year. Maybe the rationale for that's been proposed is that new administration, Congress trying to work with the new administration, wants to set the stage for really doing something substantial in the next year. Hopefully so. I think all Americans are interested in the problem. They're interested in the solutions being fair to all people. We often, everybody pays lip service to the fact that everybody wants the other guy cut and not themselves, but Americans aren't totally like that. I mean, they answer the question when the reporter says, do you want the deficit reduced? They say yes, and he puts the microphone out there and said, do you want Social Security cut or your retirement benefit from the military cut? And they obviously say no. But given the right questions, do you understand that this country has a real problem spending more money than it takes in? Are you willing to participate if everybody else is? By 90%, they say, I sure will if everybody participates.
I think that's the clue, if everyone does, and it's viewed as an equitable thing rather than a certain segment getting tremendous increases and somebody else getting reductions. And since the environment and the economy are closely intertwined, is it correct that the Congress is intermingling Social Security funds still when they're considering the deficit, so we're really not getting an adequate picture of the severity of the deficit?
Well, I think it's true of other funds as well. You hear this growing discussion of what's on budget and what's off budget. And when these trust funds, like Social Security Trust Fund, is counted in the budget, well, that's right now we've got a big plus in that because we're getting ready for, the baby boom generation retiring, so that makes it look less. We've got, as those involved in development and roads know, we've got a huge highway trust fund that we don't spend much out of, but we put that in the budget and it makes it look like we're better off than we are. And the Federal Aviation Trust Funds, the same way. So we've got to start realizing that in the way we account for things, that the problem is probably categorically worse than we've led ourselves to believe.
Well, I appreciate your mentioning that, and I think it makes it easier for people to deal with proposed reductions when they understand all the facts.
That's right. That's right.
And jumping back to your plastics bill, or the House plastic bill that you've been involved with, could you tell us a little bit about that too?
Well, I think the guts of that whole thing is that, if without increasing so tremendously the cost of packaging materials and that kind of thing, if we can find ways that those materials will be able to, as they say, be biodegradable, meaning that they don't have a long life when they're disposed of and they don't pollute the surrounding area, that if we call for those kind of changes, and what we're saying is, in a sense, that there's an economic cost to having trash out there that won't go away. And if you can make changes in it so it will go away, just like throwing an apple core out there, then you've got something, and it's worth the effort to push in that direction, I think.
I think it's an excellent idea, and particularly when plastics are also causing problems in our surface waters as well as our landfills.
Absolutely.
And we'll be back in just a moment and to pick up on this discussion. Welcome back to ManaSota-88's Environment. We're lucky to have Congressman Andy Ireland here with us today as our guest. We'll pick up where we left off, discussing various environmental issues that the Congressman has taken a lead position on. And one of those is in our coastal zone management, and I'd like for you to tell us about that. We're all aware of the problems that we have.
Well, I think as most of our viewers know, the coastal zone management idea is so that the states can have some say over their coasts and what the overall development is. A very, I believe, thoughtful approach by the federal government some years ago. The problem is that we have with it that I believe needs serious correcting is that in the early 1980s, some interests went to the Supreme Court and got a ruling that this coastal zone management law, although a federal one, didn't apply to the federal government itself in certain instances. All of which means, for instance, that the state of Florida can't have any say in its coastal zone management about drilling 100 miles offshore, even though the drilling results in either pipelines or transportation of oil into the coastal zone and onto shore. The idea that that doesn't affect the coastal zone is ludicrous, and the type of legislation that I and a number of others are proposing is to go to what we believe is the original intent of Congress, and that is the coastal zone that gives the state some say in the process of activity along its coast should include the federal government, include things beyond the area of the coast when eventually they will affect the coast. So we're pushing very hard for that, and if we can succeed in getting it passed, I think it'll bring some perspective. That's not to say that the state can ultimately be a permanent veto. That's not right either. At the same time, it would give the state a chance to go to the highest court on individual instances to have it adjudicated as to what is the best thing to do. So I think it's an important key part of protecting our coastal environment.
And as Congressman Ireland has pointed out, we're affected by what happens in the federal waters, a good example being the drilling and the offshore effects and the transportation effects of crude oil and what might result on our shores is a good example, Port Manatee. So this would be a very beneficial thing, I think, to protecting the main economy of our area if you
Absolutely.
can get this developed. And also, what about your coastal states? Is it a coastal state coalition?
Yeah, I think that this is, we call it the Coastal States Coalition, and that adds a great deal of dignity to it, and what it amounts to is just American, good old American group politics at work. One of the principal congressman from the state of California is a man by the name of Leon Panetta. He happens to be the chairman of the Budget Committee, but he and I came to the Congress together. We share coastal problems from the standpoint of he's got drilling problems off his coast, transportation of oil problems. We face that prospect in Florida. Leon Panetta and I got together and said, look, the way things are, this is several years ago, the way things are going, we're all going to hang separately if we don't hang together. And indeed, we put together our Florida congressman, congressmen from Massachusetts, New Jersey, Oregon, California, and the state of Washington into this coalition. So those that would oppose what we believe are in the best interests of our coastal areas in America in general would have a more formidable group to attack or persuade or deal with. And so far, it's paid off. We went right to work and let our power be known and saved the Outer Banks off of Massachusetts from being drilled on in our first instance. And so it works, and that's what American politics are all about.
That's great. And I also think an issue of great concern to all of us, too, is our beach erosion problem and the tremendous economic outlay versus the environmental wisdom and how long we can maintain a program like this. And what is your feeling, and where are you in trying to get funds for beach erosion projects?
Well, at the present time, we're trying very hard to get the federal matching funds for the set-aside state funds to put Anna Maria's Beach back together so that if we have an emergency, we don't have people unable to get back to the mainland. The problems here are above all budgetary. We just don't have the funds in the federal government. Last year, no new projects of this kind were started. This year, there undoubtedly have to be some. We're trying to get it high on the priority list. What we're dealing with here is something that long before we understood that about the problems of being on barrier islands as far as our development was concerned. We've built there. We're there, and we have people's lives and property to protect, and also an industry of tourism industry that all of us here in this part of Florida know puts bread on the table, so to speak, way beyond the territory of the beach. So it's an important project for us in its state. It has to work with the very difficult priority setting in the overall government. People always ask me, well, what do you think the chances are? And I have to say that it's a 50-50 proposition now. There are needs for funds all across the United States, and we have to play in the big league along that line, and sometimes it's difficult.
Right. Probably not a popular position, but I believe, excuse me, the last time I checked, there were 14 deep sea ports in Florida, one of which was self-supporting, and all of which have massive dredging projects. I wonder if it'd be possible to reduce some of the outlay to the Corps for dredging projects and put it into beach renourishment. I'm sure it wouldn't be politically popular, yeah, but we can't have everything.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, as you and I have talked before, whether it has to do with the environment or energy or whatever it is, America has unfortunately got to learn that we can't, as you say, have everything, and we have to set priorities, and that's what we're all about. And I think we got kind of lazy over a number of years because we had such a high standard of living and we're so affluent that we got rusty about setting priorities, and now we're having to do it. It's good on a personal basis for us to set priorities. It's good for our country to have to set priorities, and you know, as you and I have discussed here today, environmental priorities need to be probably higher on the list than they've ever been before, because that's our future.
That's what the next thing I was going to get into is world cooperation and how you see it, considering the third world nations and their economic position, how you see world cooperation shaping up to remedy some of the problems that we've created for ourselves.
Well, I think our problem here, Gloria, is we need to broaden our horizons quite a bit and deal in a worldwide basis, and certainly many Americans do. We often forget while we're busy cleaning up our environment, even if we were 100% successful, we have some polluting neighbors on this earth of ours, and in many countries it's just not that high on the priority list, and not all undeveloped countries. There are some developed countries that haven't grown to understand the nature of the threat to the environment. So it shouldn't be discouraging. It should be a challenge that we can't just solve our problem here at home. We have got to encourage others around the world to solve the problem as well. I can't think of an issue more than the ozone problems. Sure, there are some that dispute, you know, what's happening to the ozone shield and whether we're really causing it or not, but there's enough evidence to indicate there's a good chance we are, and that's just not an American problem. That's a Western European problem. It's a Soviet problem. It's a Japanese problem. It's a round the world problem, and we have to be part of if we're going to be leaders, we need to lead in that category.
Well, I totally agree, and I think Mrs. Thatcher brought that home to all of us, and that hopefully President Bush, I believe, has followed suit. So definitely we need to be leaders. And just real quickly, EPA has not done a very good job of late. I don't think anybody could deny that. They haven't enforced their regulations. Unfortunately, their Science Advisory Board has had problems. They've been heavily weighted with industry. Do you see that changing for the good under Mr. Riley and President Bush?
Oh, definitely. I think Mr. Riley is well informed. He's a real student, a scholar, and he knows what needs to be done, and I think he'll do quite a good job. I think President Bush, just in his reaction to our offshore oil thing, is aware of problems along this line. I think it'll move up, as we were talking the priority list. I think it's going to move up. In deference to anybody that's been associated with the EPA, I would say that it's not always all the EPA's problems. The good old United States Congress, of which I am a member, often gets some of the blame as far as I'm concerned, because we send very often legislative conflicting instructions, and we often make our laws either too complicated or ambiguous and such that leaves the the administrator, whoever he is in the EPA, kind of out on a limb.
I agree, and I hope that under your leadership and President Bush's and others that this can be remedied. And again, we're so grateful for your being here today, and we're grateful for the job you're doing, and keep it up.
Thank you, Gloria. Nice to be
Thank
with
you again for
Thank you.
coming.